My mom took my daughter's luggage, hid it, and told the kids she wasn't going on the family trip anymore. Then she looked me dead in the eye and said, maybe next year if she learns her place. I just made a scene and did this. It all started when I went to pick up my daughter's suitcase from my mom's guest bedroom. We were supposed to leave for a weekend trip to Colorado, something we'd been planning for months. My husband, me, and the kids. A small cabin in the mountains, sledding, hot cocoa, no cell service. It was supposed to be peaceful. A memory maker. But her suitcase was gone. I checked the closet first, then under the bed. Nothing. I opened the garage door just in case it was put there by mistake. Still nothing. I called for my mom and asked if she'd seen a small pink rolling bag with cartoon cats on it. I'll never forget the way she responded. She didn't even look up from her coffee. She just said it like it was the most casual thing in the world. She's not going on the trip. I stood there blinking, waiting for a punchline or some clarification. When I didn't get one, I asked, "What do you mean?" She took a sip, set the mug down, and said, "I put it away. She's not coming. Maybe next year if she learns her place." That's when it clicked. This wasn't a mistake. She'd hidden my daughter's luggage on purpose. And now she was looking me straight in the eye like she'd just enforced some kind of household rule. My daughter is 4 years old. She's my husband's child from his previous marriage. And from day one, my parents never accepted her. Not really. They never said it outright. It was always little things. Leaving her out of family photos. Bringing gifts for the other kids but not her. Referring to her as his child. It was subtle, quiet, underhanded. He'll know. Now it was just cruel. I told her to tell me exactly where she'd put the suitcase. She smiled and said, "It's safe. But she's not part of this family, Linda. You need to stop pretending." That was it. I walked straight outside and called my husband, told him to get inside immediately. He was loading the car with snacks and snow boots. When I told him what happened, he just stared at me for a second like he couldn't believe I wasn't joking. Then he walked inside and told everyone, to come to the living room. We had my siblings there, their spouses, a few cousins, and all the kids. It was a full house. My daughter didn't understand what was happening, but she could sense the tension. She clung to my leg. Once everyone was gathered, I didn't sugarcoat it. I told them what my parents did. I said they hid a 4-year-old suitcase and decided, all on their own, that she wasn't welcome on the family trip. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just laid it all out. People were stunned. Some didn't believe it. My dad stood there with that smug look he gets when he thinks he's in the right. He said, "You seriously expect us to pretend she's our granddaughter? You're not even her mother." My husband stepped in and said, "No, but I am her father. And Linda is her mother now, and if you can't respect that, you're out. You're out of our lives. Out of our business. Out of our future." You could hear the air shift. My parents went pale. My husband has a successful business, the same one they've been slowly trying to edge into. They always assumed he'd offer them roles, connections, money. That dream vanished in seconds. I told him in front of everyone, "They're done. We're done. From now on, they don't exist to me." And I meant it. Because that wasn't just a suitcase. That was a message. They were trying to erase my daughter. They were trying to send a warning to me. And they thought I'd just accept it again. But not this time. I'd been sending them $700 a week for the past year. My husband gave me the money freely. He never asked questions. He knew they weren't kind to me, but he trusted my judgment. That ends now. They don't get our support, our help, or our time. Ever again. That day changed everything. And I had no idea how much worse things were going to get before it was all over. We left for the trip without saying goodbye. Not a word. My parents stood on the porch watching us go like we were the ones who'd done something wrong. My daughter was in the back seat, holding her stuffed owl, humming a song she made up. She didn't know that suitcase thing meant something. But I did. And it sat in my chest the whole drive like a weight I couldn't get rid of. The cabin was perfect. Snow up to the windows, a little fireplace, frozen lake in the back. My husband did everything to make it special. We roasted marshmallows, played board games, watched old Christmas movies. But no matter how good it was, something felt wrong. The third night I broke. I told him everything. Every little thing my parents had done that I hadn't shared before. How they only ever brought gifts for my stepniece and nephew but never for her. How they'd leave her name off birthday cards. How they always said things like, "You'll understand when you have your own child." He listened. Then he asked calmly, "Why do you still send them money?" I couldn't answer. I had been sending them $700 every week for over a year. My husband gave me the money freely. It was never a fight. He always said, "Help them if you want to." So I did. And I told myself they needed it and I owed them that much. But after what happened with the suitcase, I couldn't justify it anymore. When we got back home, I logged into my bank account and canceled the automatic transfer. I didn't tell them. I didn't give them a warning. I just cut it. Took exactly 3 days. My mom texted first. Just a single question mark. Then, is something wrong with the bank? Then a full paragraph accusing me of being ungrateful, cold, and blinded by my husband. She ended it with, "Don't forget who raised you." Then came my dad. "What the hell are you doing? You're acting like we're strangers." I didn't respond. That's when they showed up. Not together. Separately. First, my dad drove to my husband's office. I only found out when his assistant called and said some man claiming to be family had tried to get in without an appointment. He told the front desk he had an urgent matter about the business. Security walked him out. The next day my mom showed up at my house. I was alone with the kids. She knocked for nearly 10 minutes, then just stood there. Didn't leave. Didn't call. Finally, she pushed something through the mail slot and walked off. It was a letter. 3 handwritten pages in that tiny rushed cursive she always used when she was emotional. She didn't apologize. Not once. She blamed me. Told me I was ruining my future. That I'd thrown away a lifetime of love for a child who would never fully be mine. She said I was being manipulated by a man who didn't understand loyalty. She said I'd regret this. I didn't finish it. I read enough to know where it was going. I tore it up and dumped it in the trash. But one line stuck with me and it made my skin crawl. "You think you're punishing us, but you're punishing yourself." That same week, we heard from one of the board members of my husband's company. He said he'd received an anonymous email claiming there were concerns about how funds were being handled. It didn't take long to trace it back. My parents had contacted him directly, using a mutual connection from some fundraiser years ago. They told him my husband might be in over his head and offered to step in and advise. They tried to sabotage his reputation, his business, all because they weren't getting money or control anymore. He didn't get angry. He didn't yell. He just turned to me and said, "I'm done. If they want war, they can have it. But they're not part of our life. Not anymore." That's when we started documenting everything. And that's when I realized something. This wasn't just about them rejecting my daughter. It was about control, power, entitlement. And they were never going to stop unless we made it impossible for them to keep coming back. 2 weeks of silence. After everything, that's what I got. Not a single message, call, visit, nothing. Just quiet. It was too quiet. The kind that doesn't mean peace, it means plotting. My husband told me to enjoy it, that maybe they'd finally realized they'd gone too far. But I know my parents. They don't retreat. They regroup. And when they're quiet, it just means they're crafting the next move. It came not from them directly but through my sister. A text in the middle of the night. "Are you seriously cutting off Mom and Dad? For good?" I replied with one word, "Yes." I figured that was the end of it. But no. She called me 2 minutes later. I didn't pick up. Then she left a voicemail. Emotional, messy, full of guilt-tripping and questions. She said they were devastated, that I was letting some man and a child who isn't even yours turn you against your own blood. I played it on speaker. My husband just shook his head and walked out of the room. She didn't even know what had happened. They never told her about the suitcase, about the letter, about the business sabotage. They painted themselves as victims abandoned by their ungrateful daughter who'd forgotten everything they sacrificed for her. I didn't argue. I texted her back and said, "When you're ready to hear the truth, I'll tell you. But until then, don't contact me again." The next few days were chaos. First my aunt called. Then a cousin. Then an old friend of the family I hadn't spoken to in years messaged me on Facebook. They were all saying the same thing, asking what was going on, telling me they'd heard I'd turned against my parents, that I was cutting off support while they were struggling. That's when I knew my parents had gone full campaign mode. They were calling everyone they could think of, telling them I'd stopped sending them money, that my husband had brainwashed me, that I was neglecting them emotionally, financially, and even morally, because of a child that wasn't really mine. They didn't just want sympathy. They wanted pressure. They were trying to rally people to guilt me into crawling back. I didn't. I stayed quiet. I didn't even bother defending myself. Not yet. But my husband was done. He called his lawyer and made everything official. My parents were to be excluded, permanently, from anything connected to the business. They'd never held formal roles, but they'd been allowed to attend fundraisers, networking dinners, and sometimes represented themselves as advisors. That was over. He didn't just tell them no. He legally barred them from any association with his name, his company, or any of the future projects he was working on. He showed me the paperwork. Black ink on white paper. Cold and final. I stared at it and asked him why he didn't tell me he was doing this. He said, "Because they tried to play dirty. This is us locking the door." And then he asked, "Are you ready to do the same?" I knew what he meant. It wasn't about drama or revenge anymore. It wasn't about cutting off the money or ignoring the calls. It was about closing the book. Completely. Making sure there were no open windows they could crawl through. No more emotional loopholes. So I did. I blocked their numbers. I deleted them from every contact list. Doctor, daycare, school. I messaged the babysitter and said if they ever show up at the house, she's not to open the door. I told our neighbors too, just in case. I even blocked them from accessing my cloud photo albums, which I found out they'd still been viewing through an old link. Felt like pulling nails out of my own skin. And for a moment it was quiet again. But then, as if they'd sensed I was finally cutting the last thread, they did something I couldn't believe. They showed up at my daughter's preschool. I found out when the director called me. Said an older couple claiming to be her grandparents had come during lunch hour asking to see her. They said they had permission. That there had been a family mix-up, and they were clearing it up. But they didn't. They didn't have permission. And they were lying. The school followed protocol. Didn't let them in. Called me right away. But if they hadn't? If someone new had been working that day? I don't even want to think about what could have happened. I hung up the phone shaking. My daughter was safe. She never even knew they were there. But I did. And something in me snapped for good. This wasn't about family anymore. This was war. After the preschool incident, something in me snapped. It was one thing to disrespect me, to humiliate my daughter, to lie, manipulate, sabotage. But showing up at her school? Lying to staff and trying to access her without my consent? Well, that was it. That was the moment I decided my parents were no longer my parents. I don't care who raised me or what they did for me in the past. I don't care what blood ties exist on paper. The people who showed up at that preschool were strangers. And dangerous ones. The school did everything right, thankfully. They refused to let them in and called me immediately. My daughter was in the middle of finger painting and didn't even notice. But that could have gone 100 different ways. And the fact that they tried to use their fake charm to push their way into her life, it made me physically sick. I spent the entire night sitting in the hallway outside her room. She slept like nothing had happened. I just watched the rise and fall of her chest and thought, never again. The next morning I drove straight to the school. I brought every legal document we had. Custody forms, birth certificates, photos. I met with the director, the staff, even the security guard who'd been on duty that day. I had my parents officially flagged in their system. I added their pictures to a restricted file so they'd never be allowed near her again. But I wasn't done. I went home and started locking down everything. I changed passwords, removed their names from emergency contacts, deleted old email accounts they might still have access to, set up two-step verification on everything. My husband called our home security company and had the whole system upgraded. Motion sensors, cameras, even a panic button. We weren't taking chances anymore. But just when we thought we'd seen the worst, they escalated. 2 days later, my husband got a call from his accountant. Someone had called pretending to be me. Said they were updating our tax info and needed access to joint financial records. They knew enough to make it sound semi-legit. Middle names, dates, even my old work address. The accountant played along long enough to catch the lie and hung up. Then called us immediately. That's when my husband quietly hired a private investigator. He didn't tell me right away. I think he wanted to spare me the details unless it became necessary. But 5 days later he sat me down and handed me a folder. Inside were photos, notes, surveillance logs. They'd opened a P.O. box under my maiden name. And they were using it to send physical letters to people in our lives. Colleagues, neighbors, even clients. The letters were handwritten. Signed, concerned family. They were spreading lies, claiming we were unstable, that my husband was emotionally abusive, that I was neglecting my daughter, that we'd cut off everyone who tried to help. They said my daughter was not being raised by her real family, and suggested someone step in before something tragic happens. I read the letters in silence. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I just felt this cold, sharp clarity I hadn't felt before. These weren't just desperate parents lashing out. This was war. So I did what I had to do. I printed everything. I gathered every text, every voicemail, every letter, every creepy little attempt they'd made to push past boundaries. I filed for a restraining order the next morning. The hearing was set for the following week. But the day before court, something unexpected happened. My mother showed up at my office. No warning. No call. She just appeared like a ghost from a life I'd left behind. She didn't look angry. She didn't look sad. She looked satisfied. She handed me a white envelope. Inside was a copy of a handwritten will. They'd removed me completely. No inheritance. No mention. No acknowledgement. Every asset, every piece of property, every cent, left to my sister and her kids. At the bottom, in my mother's neat handwriting, "If you're going to pretend we don't exist, then we won't either." And then she left. I stood there holding the envelope, waiting to feel something. Anger, grief, maybe guilt. But instead I felt something else entirely. Relief. I handed the will to my lawyer the next morning. I told him to add it to the file. The judge granted the restraining order within 10 minutes. My parents are now legally barred from contacting me, my husband, or our daughter in any way. They can't call. They can't write. They can't show up. If they do, they'll be arrested. But I knew them. I knew they wouldn't walk away empty-handed. And I was right. They were about to go even lower than I thought possible. I honestly believed the restraining order would be the end of it. A legal wall between us and them. Something solid that said, "This is over." I thought they'd finally crawl back into their quiet little corner and sulk where no one could hear them. Maybe they'd try to save face at church. Maybe they'd complain to their friends about how ungrateful I'd become. That I could live with. But of course they weren't done. 3 weeks passed without a word. Then one afternoon, while my husband was at work and my daughter was napping, I saw my sister through the security camera, standing at my door. She had something in her hands, a tablet and a manila envelope. She didn't knock. Just stood there for maybe 10 minutes, watching the door, like she was waiting for me to crack. When she finally walked away, she slid something into the mailbox. It was a letter, addressed to my daughter. It said things like, "You're always loved, and when you're older, come find us, and we'll tell you the truth about what really happened." She's 4. She still calls her backpack a pack. She cries when we run out of purple popsicles. And they were planting seeds. Seeds of doubt, of disconnection, trying to future-proof their manipulation so when she's older, she'll question everything we ever told her. That night I told my husband. He didn't say anything at first. Just stared at the fireplace and said, "They're not done until they think they've won." He was right. Because 2 days later, CPS knocked on our door. An anonymous report had been filed. It claimed emotional neglect, psychological isolation, and that we were keeping a child away from her biological family for financial control. I don't know what kind of person can write something like that and sleep at night. But I knew who did it. There wasn't a doubt in my mind. The caseworker was professional. She interviewed both of us, walked through the house, spoke to our daughter briefly. Within 30 minutes she told us we were clearly a safe and loving family. But that didn't undo the damage. It didn't erase the feeling of someone trying to pull your life out from under you just to make a point. My husband didn't get angry. He got quiet. The next morning, without telling me, he started making calls. First to our attorney, then to his accountant. He requested full financial audits on every transaction involving my parents from the last 4 years. Gifts, transfers, loans, anything. He wanted it all documented, digitized, practiced. Then something I didn't see coming. He had his will redrafted. He called me into his office and handed me a sealed envelope. It was a revised estate plan signed that day. He'd removed every charitable contingency that could have ever benefited my parents, directly or indirectly. The trust that used to have a clause, one I had pushed for back when I still wanted to believe there was hope, was erased. Gone. He left a single note attached to the file. "No one who comes for our child gets anything from this family. Ever." I didn't know what to say. I just stood there with that letter in my hand, feeling this strange mix of heartbreak and peace. Like I was finally letting go of a version of life that was never going to exist. And then came the final call. A close family friend, someone who'd remained neutral through all of this, called me out of the blue. She said she'd been contacted by my parents. They'd asked her to intervene, to convince me to sit down for a healing conversation. But before they hung up, they said one last thing. If she doesn't come back to us, we'll make sure her daughter grows up knowing what kind of woman she really is. That was it. That was the moment I knew with absolute certainty that they'd never stop. That this would go on for years, maybe decades. Until the day my daughter turned 18. Until the day I died. They would wait, manipulate, twist, rewrite the story in their favor. Unless I ended it. Completely. So I filed a police report. I submitted everything, the school incident, the letters, the CPS visit, the threats. I sent it to my lawyer and gave him one final instruction. Make sure they can never touch her life again. The locks are changed. The security system updated. The will revised. Their names scrubbed from every document. And now, not even their memory is welcome in this house. This isn't about vengeance anymore. This is about protection. And next came the hardest part of all. The acceptance. It's been 4 months since the last phone call. 4 months since the last letter, the last drive-by, the last pathetic attempt to claw their way back into a life they tried to destroy. It's quiet now. The kind of quiet I used to think meant something terrible was about to happen. But this quiet is different. This quiet feels earned. I wish I could say it's been peaceful. That I felt nothing but relief the moment they disappeared. But healing is messier than that. Some mornings I wake up angry. Other days I feel grief so deep it stops me mid-sentence. Not because I miss them, but because I miss the version of them I thought was real. It took me a long time to admit that I didn't lose my parents. I lost the idea of them. The version I spent years defending. The version I kept trying to see through the fog of disappointment. The version I let stay in my life long after they'd made it clear who they were. I kept making excuses, kept smoothing over the rough edges, kept telling myself they'll come around. But people don't come around when they believe they're entitled to your pain. I remember sitting on the floor of our daughter's room after the CPS visit, watching her play with her dolls, pretending they were at the doctor's office. She made one of them say, "Everything is okay now," and for a second I couldn't breathe. Because that's exactly what I'd been trying to convince myself, that everything was okay now. But trauma doesn't just vanish because you closed the door. You still hear the knocks. My husband was the one who carried us when I couldn't. He made the hard calls, took legal action, protected our daughter like it was the only job he had in this world. I'll never forget the night he said to me, "We're not reacting anymore. We're protecting. There's a difference." That sentence changed everything. And we did protect. We rewrote our wills, rebuilt our trust files, cut out every possible loophole they could use. The investigator confirmed they'd gone silent, probably out of fear, not remorse. Good. Fear was overdue. We didn't just move on. We moved forward. Our daughter turned 5 last week. She asked for glitter slime, purple balloons, pancakes for dinner, and a day with just us. No grown-up noise. That's what she calls drama now. Grown-up noise. So we drove to a little animal sanctuary an hour away, pet goats, laughed until we cried, and ended the day with sticky hands and a half-eaten cake in the trunk. No one else. No outsiders. Just us. She fell asleep in the backseat holding my hand, and I remember thinking, this is it. This is family. And it hit me, they could have had this. My parents. They could have sat on that patio with us holding hot cocoa, watching their granddaughter chase ducks in 2 big boots. They could have been loved. But they didn't want love. They wanted control. And when I refused to give it, they set everything on fire and dared me to cry over the ashes. But I didn't. Instead, I built something new. Something quiet and strong and real. And now when I think of them, it's not with hate. It's with clarity. The kind that only comes when you stop begging people to be who they're never going to be. I stopped begging. I stopped explaining. And I started living. They don't know where we are anymore. They don't know how we spend our days. They don't get updates or access or the chance to rewrite the story. They lost that right the day they tried to erase a child to make a point. And here's the truth they'll never be able to touch. He's happy. He's safe. He's loved. And so am I.
Thanks for watching. If this story made you think, don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. See you in the next one.